On the rugged mountain ranges of Montana, where dense forests blend with highland grasslands and winding river valleys, wild bears roam freely through a vast and majestic landscape. While they symbolize the strength and freedom of this land, their growing numbers also bring increasing concerns. Bears often break into farms, destroy livestock feed, and rummage through waste, causing significant property damage each year and sometimes creating dangerous situations for both humans and animals. Wild bears are among the most iconic and formidable animals in North America, and Montana is one of their ideal habitats. Among dense pine forests, towering Rocky Mountains, and wide river valleys, two main species dominate: black bears and the larger, more powerful grizzly bears. As omnivores, they feed on everything from berries, roots, fish, and insects to larger prey. Thanks to vast wilderness areas like Glacier National Park and the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, bear populations in Montana continue to thrive, making this region both a paradise for nature lovers and a harsh test for those living on the edge between wilderness and human settlements. In areas where bears repeatedly return near farms and residential zones, control can no longer rely on random reactions or temporary measures. Instead, carefully planned trapping systems must be deployed, tailored to the movement patterns and level of caution of each individual animal. One commonly used method is large steel cage traps, placed precisely at locations the bear has approached multiple times over consecutive nights. The goal is not only to contain the bear, but also to ensure the entire control process remains stable and minimizes risks for both humans and the animal. The effectiveness of this system does not lie in its size, but in how accurately it is positioned along the bear's familiar travel routes. Before deployment, days of monitoring are required to determine exactly where the animal passes, where it lingers, and how it approaches food sources. Footprints in soft soil, claw marks on tree trunks, overturned trash, and repeatedly used paths all serve as key indicators for placement. Only when these signs are clear is bait placed deep inside, forcing the bear to fully enter the controlled zone. However, not every individual reacts in predictable ways. Bears that have previously encountered humans or escaped control efforts tend to become highly cautious. In such cases, cage traps are no longer ideal, and teams must switch to a more discreet method: foothold snare traps placed directly along established travel paths. The entire mechanism is carefully concealed beneath soil, leaf litter, and surrounding natural elements to avoid creating anything unusual. When the bear steps into position, the cable loop tightens almost instantly and is anchored to a secure point strong enough to prevent the animal from moving far. Under Montana's harsh conditions, controlling a bear is never a matter of chance, but the result of observation, patience, and field experience. Bear hunting requires meticulous planning, specialized equipment, and absolute respect for the animal. Hunting seasons typically occur in spring and fall, depending on the region and species. While some areas allow baiting, this practice is completely prohibited in Montana for ethical and ecological reasons. As a result, participants must rely on natural terrain and a deep understanding of bear behavior. If you were living in Montana and faced the challenge of dealing with one of North America's most formidable predators, would you choose to observe, control, or confront it directly? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow for more journeys into wildlife control, survival, and life at the edge of the wild.
For many years, bears were considered animals that lived separately, avoiding humans. But as habitats overlap, unexpected encounters have begun to appear. No longer just brief sightings. There have been situations where bears directly approached people in forests, on trails, even at the edges of residential areas. And in field management, the greatest danger does not lie in the moment the trap is activated. It lies in how the entire area is handled afterward. Bears do not act randomly. They respond to chains of stimuli: scent, movement, sound, spatial memory. If an intervention point is handled without control, that area can become a marker in their behavioral map. An individual that once approached humans without clear resistance may return again. And when bold behavior is not interrupted, the level of risk increases over time. In modern control systems, the goal is not to react after a single incident. The goal is to prevent dangerous behavior from repeating. At forest edges or near hiking routes, infrared cameras and motion sensors are installed to accurately identify individuals showing signs of approaching humans. Correct identification is critical. Not every bear displays dangerous behavior, but an individual that has previously attacked or approached too closely must be handled under a separate protocol. Once the area is confirmed, The control team deploys specialized cage traps or foothold traps with controlled clamping force. The foothold trap is specifically designed to secure a bear's front limb without causing serious harm. Its curved structure, pressure-limiting springs, and safety locking system ensure the animal cannot withdraw its paw. This is not equipment used carelessly. It is placed only at confirmed high-risk locations and always accompanied by remote monitoring. When the target individual steps into the exact position, the automatic mechanism activates, forcing it to stop moving. As soon as the signal is transmitted to the monitoring center, the rapid response team immediately moves to the site. Captured individuals are sedated under standard veterinary procedures and then transported away from the area as quickly as possible. No prolonged noise. No lingering scent or chaotic traces. The entire site is cleaned and restored to a neutral state immediately afterward. If handled carelessly, a trap site can become a memory point in a bear's perception. But if handled correctly, it disappears from their behavioral map. No signal, no confirmation of risk or reward, just an information void. Near residential areas, every action must comply with even stricter regulations. No public gathering. No images spreading panic. No individual left restrained on site for extended periods. The objective is not only to control the immediate situation, but to ensure the location is not remembered as a confrontation point. All captured individuals are transported to designated facilities according to wildlife management regulations. Depending on behavioral assessment and risk level, they may be redirected to appropriate habitats or handled under specialized professional plans. Most importantly, they do not return to their previous location to reinforce human approach behavior. In bear management, success is not measured by the number of traps deployed. It is measured by whether aggressive behavior ceases, whether trails become safe again, whether residents can walk and work outdoors without constant alertness. Traps are only tools. Long-term stability comes from how the entire system is operated, from identification and monitoring to activation, transport, and environmental restoration. When the chain of dangerous behavior is broken, the chain of risk to people ends quietly as well. and the greatest success is when no further attacks occur, when the forest returns to being its natural space, and humans are no longer within reach of uncontrolled behavior.
In recent times, wild boars have begun appearing more frequently in this area. At night, they move down into the fields, tearing up the soil and destroying crops. More concerning, during the day, some individuals have started entering residential areas, appearing near homes and streets. There have been multiple cases of people encountering aggressive boars and being attacked unexpectedly. The situation quickly spiraled out of control, forcing local authorities to launch a large-scale control operation. Reconnaissance flights using helicopters were carried out continuously to locate where the boars were hiding and track their movement routes. Based on the collected data, the control team quickly planned a large-scale trapping system, placing it exactly at the paths the herd frequently used. Everything was carefully prepared, because even a small mistake could cause the entire herd to disappear and become more cautious. And once the location was confirmed, the trap construction officially began. Heavy steel panels were brought in and assembled into a fully enclosed circular structure at the predetermined location. Each joint was tightly secured and driven deep into the dry ground to ensure maximum stability. The sound of metal clashing echoed clearly through the quiet surroundings. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a rigid steel frame. But in reality, it was like a massive door waiting for the moment to shut.
That'd be nice.
When you set it up, you make sure your box is on there.
Once the structure was complete, we moved into the final preparation stage. Infrared cameras were installed around the area, mounted high on tree trunks to monitor every path leading to the trap. All actions were carried out quickly while minimizing human traces. Then the bait was set. Bags of corn were opened, releasing a faint sweet scent into the air, scattered into a trail leading deeper
That bully one stays up there
inside.
and won't let none of the other ones in. That's why we want the bait at the back.
The largest amount of bait was placed at the center of the trap. This became the main attraction, gradually drawing the herd deeper inside, without them realizing the boundaries around it. Once everything was in place, the area returned to silence. Only the faint scent of corn lingered in the air. Somewhere in the forest, sensitive noses had already begun to pick up the smell. As night fell, the stillness grew heavier. Then, the first signs of movement appeared on the monitoring screens. The boars had arrived. The lead so stepped forward first, slowly sniffing and assessing the surroundings. Behind her, the rest of the herd followed. Wild boars are naturally cautious, but hunger and the scent of food dulled their instincts. Guided by the lead animal, one by one, they moved deeper inside. There was no hesitation, no suspicion. When the entire herd was fully inside the trap, the decisive moment had arrived. Without warning, the gate was triggered. The sound of metal crashing shattered the silence of the forest. The entire herd fell into panic. They rushed in all directions, slamming into the barriers and colliding with each other in a desperate attempt to escape. The ground was torn apart under the force of their hooves and heavy bodies. The strongest ones tried to break through the structure, but the steel walls held firm. Smaller ones attempted to jump or climb, but the height and design of the trap stopped them every time. Panic spread as they realized there was no way out. Before sunrise, we returned to the trap site. By then, the boars were no longer thrashing violently like during the night. Many were exhausted, breathing heavily after hours of trying to escape. Some stood still, weighed down by fatigue, yet still alert. Even so, their instincts made them react sharply to any movement. Seeing more than 20 boars contained at once, the farmers finally let out a breath of relief. It was the moment they knew the plan had truly worked.
Hey guys, let's go. There you go. Look, she is a tough. Taylor.
Bears rarely appear with loud noises in the middle of the night. They usually arrive silently and are difficult to detect at first. Large footprints imprinted in the moist ground behind the house, shifted trash lids, or long claw marks on storage doors are the first signs, noticeable if observed carefully. Farm owners often see them but choose to ignore, reassuring themselves that the bear may just be passing through. It is possible the bear will not return. Everyone wants to believe it is a one-time, incidental appearance that is not worrisome and does not require immediate reaction, even though the risk remains present. However, bears do not move randomly as many people assume. Once they find an easily accessible food source, they can remember the location with high accuracy. Their keen sense of smell allows them to detect grains, honey, or livestock feed from far distances in the wild. If the initial approach is successful, a return visit is almost certain. At first, it may be a single individual, but over time the frequency of appearances increases. These visits gradually form a repeating, predictable pattern. A notable characteristic of bears is their persistence and quiet strength. They do not need to cause significant damage initially to achieve their goal. A single displaced trash can or a slightly warped wooden door is enough to create a familiar initial access point. When the environment does not provide clear obstacles, this behavior repeats as a habit. Over time, their confidence grows. A previously quiet area gradually becomes a familiar stop in their food-searching route without much interference. Many people underestimate the early stage because the damage seems minor. However, night by night, the area affected gradually expands more noticeably. Bears come closer to human living areas, searching for food near residences. Under motion sensor lights, they move cautiously but without hesitation. As wildlife becomes accustomed to human presence, the risk of direct encounters rises. This makes every situation more unpredictable and poses higher potential risks for both parties. At this point, using traps is no longer considered an extreme measure. It becomes part of a carefully planned and calculated control strategy. The goal is not confrontation, but to break the established pattern of repeated visits. When food is no longer easily accessible, entry becomes more difficult. This forces bears to change their movement routes, reduce visit frequency, and seek other areas more suitable for their survival needs. Setting traps is not done hastily or arbitrarily. Farm operators need to observe the timing of bear appearances, familiar routes, and spots where they linger the longest. Footprints on the ground, claw marks on trees, and images from night surveillance cameras provide important data. Once behaviors are analyzed clearly, trap locations are precisely determined. Metal cages are firmly secured to the ground, with enough space for bears to enter naturally, and bait is placed deep inside for effective attraction. In some cases, specialized traps are also used under strict regulations. The restraint mechanisms are adjusted to ensure effective control while minimizing harm. Devices are regularly checked to ensure safety and allow prompt processing. Safety for humans and animals is always prioritized throughout the entire control process.
For many years, bears were seen
okay.
as animals that lived separately and avoided humans.
Yeah, get up there! Get up!
But as the boundary between forests and residential areas gradually blurred, encounters began to occur more frequently. These were no longer brief sightings, but direct approaches along trails, forest edges, and even near homes. The issue is not only the presence of bears, but how each encounter is handled by people. Bears do not move randomly, but respond to familiar signals such as scent, sound, and spatial memory. An area handled without control can become a reference point in their behavior. When an individual approaches humans without resistance, the likelihood of returning becomes almost certain. If this pattern is not stopped early, the level of risk increases with each repetition. After confirming the area, control teams deploy traps that match the level of risk. Among them, foothold traps are designed to secure the front limb without causing serious injury. Their curved structure and pressure limiting mechanism help ensure safety during restraint. These devices are only placed at verified locations and are always paired with remote monitoring to prevent errors. When the target steps into position, the mechanism activates immediately, forcing it to stop moving. A signal is sent to the control center, and the rapid response team arrives on site without delay. The captured individual is sedated under controlled procedures and quickly removed from the area. The entire process is kept short, minimizing noise and leaving no traces that disturb the environment. If handled carelessly, a trap site can become a memory point in a bear's perception. But when done correctly, it leaves no noticeable signal behind. No reward, no clear danger, just a gap that prevents the behavior from being reinforced. This is the key factor in stopping future returns. In areas near residential zones, control protocols are even stricter. There are no gatherings, no spread of alarming images, and no individual left restrained on site for long periods. The goal is not only to resolve the current situation, but to ensure the location does not become a point of confrontation between humans and wildlife. Captured individuals are transferred to specialized facilities for behavioral and risk assessment. Depending on the results, they may be relocated to suitable habitats or managed under specific plans. Most importantly, they are not returned to the original location, where habits of approaching humans could form again. In reality, bear intrusions into residential areas are increasing. They do not just search for food in trash bins, but also break doors, enter homes, and cause property damage. Many areas have recorded hundreds of incidents within a short time, forcing some businesses to temporarily close due to repeated losses. Although preventive measures such as bear-resistant bins and limiting outdoor food sources have been applied, the situation is still not fully controlled. Some regions allow licensed hunters to participate in population control, but this approach carries risks and is strictly regulated. In the end, success is not measured by how many traps are set or how many individuals are captured, but by whether dangerous behavior stops. When the chain of approach is broken, the environment gradually returns to stability, and people no longer live in constant alert. If you find this useful, leave a comment and follow for more effective control strategies ahead.
across the vast fields of southern Texas, where patches of torn-up soil stretch like scars across the land night after night, wild boars no longer appear as a random occurrence. They have become an organized pressure. At first, the damage was limited to a few corners of farmland, but within just a few days, entire areas could be torn apart as if an invisible storm had swept through. The real issue does not lie in the destructive power of individual animals, but in how the entire herd moves along fixed routes, repeating almost exactly each night. And once that pattern is established, trapping is no longer an experiment. It becomes a strategy that demands precision down to the smallest detail. In the early stage, small cage traps were deployed with a simple goal: to capture individual animals quickly. But reality unfolded in the exact opposite direction. Each time one boar was caught, the rest of the herd did not return as expected, but instead showed clear behavioral changes. They approached more slowly, paused longer at safe distances, and even retreated entirely if they detected any unusual signs. This made small traps not only ineffective, but they also unintentionally trained the herd to become more cautious. Each failure was not just a missed opportunity. It became a lesson remembered by the entire group. From that point, a completely different approach began to take shape. Instead of targeting individuals, the focus shifted to controlling the entire herd in a single attempt. Large-scale trapping systems started to appear, no longer resembling a trap, but more like an open space that did not create a sense of confinement. Steel posts were arranged in wide circular formations, but not too densely to avoid raising suspicion. There were no doors slamming shut immediately, no obvious mechanical movements. Everything was designed to blend into the natural environment, as if it were just a normal part of the landscape. The first phase was not about capturing, but about familiarization. Bait was placed outside at first, then gradually moved deeper into the trapping area. For many consecutive days, no action was taken. The herd began to approach, initially as individuals, then in small groups. They stepped in and out, observed, and returned again. Over time, the boundary between outside and inside gradually disappeared. Once most of the herd became comfortable moving in and out of the area without encountering danger, the trap finally entered its operational phase. The most critical moment does not lie in the activation, but in the timing of the wait. The operator must monitor through cameras, patiently waiting until the entire herd has entered, with no individuals left lingering at the edges. Only then is the system activated remotely. A large gate drops in an instant, sealing off the entire space. There is no second chance. If triggered too early, the remaining animals will learn and disappear. If too late, the herd may retreat. Here, precision is not measured in seconds, but in the depth of behavioral understanding. The entire process requires time and near absolute patience. For many days, even weeks, there is no direct human interference. Distance is maintained. All signs of intervention are eliminated. The herd gradually returns to its normal habits, but within a space that has already been controlled. And when the right moment arrives, the system is activated one final time, precise, decisive, leaving no gaps. The final result is not just the number of boars captured, but the disruption of the herd's entire movement cycle. Once that structure is broken, familiar routes are no longer used, and the pressure on farmland decreases significantly. This shows that the true effectiveness of the system does not lie in the mechanics of opening and closing, but in its ability to control behavior on a large scale. The conflict between humans and wild boars has never been a contest of strength. It is a competition of adaptability. With each failure, the boars become more cunning. And with each adjustment, humans must become more precise. In an environment where every detail can be detected, a single small mistake can cause the entire strategy to collapse before it even takes effect. In recent years, the appearance of black bears around residential areas is no longer a rare occurrence. Security cameras not only capture fleeting silhouettes in the night, but also reveal purposeful movement. Heading straight toward trash bins, food storage areas, or livestock enclosures. This is not a moment of curiosity. It is a sign of behavioral change, as bears begin to treat human areas as an extension of their foraging territory. And once this habit forms, controlling it becomes significantly more difficult. Unlike many other species, bears do not move randomly. They have excellent memory. A readily accessible food source can cause them to return to the exact same location repeatedly for weeks, even months. Large footprints pressed into damp soil, scratched tree trunks, or overturned trash bins are not just traces, they are a behavioral map. And to control effectively, the first step is not setting traps, but accurately reading that map. At a forest edge location, after weeks of monitoring with infrared cameras, a movement pattern began to emerge clearly. A large bear consistently appeared around 1 a.m., moving along the fence behind the farm and stopping at a fixed point where leftover food had once been found. There was no rush, no panic. Every movement was slow but precise, as if it had memorized the route. Instead of reacting immediately, the control team chose to extend the observation phase. They did not set traps right away. Instead, they established a stable bait station. Using strong-smelling attractants such as mixed grains, pastries, and sugar-based products. The scent spread through the air, but not abruptly enough to trigger suspicion. Over the course of 2 weeks, this location remained unchanged. The goal was not rapid attraction, but familiarity. Once the appearance frequency became consistent, the next step began. A steel tube trap system was installed flush with the ground, covered with soil and dry leaves to blend into the surrounding environment. The trap opening was designed just large enough for the bear to insert its paw, with bait placed deep inside to force further interaction. No element in the structure was allowed to create a sense of abnormality. When the bear approached and inserted its paw deeper to reach the bait, the internal mechanism was triggered. There was no loud noise, no chaos, just a controlled movement sufficient to hold the front paw in place, preventing immediate withdrawal. The system was designed to remain stable, causing no serious harm, but sufficient to control the situation. Immediately afterward, the response team arrived. The entire subsequent process was carried out according to standard procedures. Sedation under expert supervision, health assessment, and transport to an appropriate location for further handling in compliance with regulations. There was no haste, no confrontation. Everything unfolded as part of a pre-planned process. What is noteworthy is not the trap itself, but how it is used. If placed in the wrong location at the wrong time or without proper observation, the entire system becomes meaningless. Bears are not easily deceived. A single sign of abnormality can cause them to change routes and disappear for weeks. In the context of increasing human-wildlife conflict, control methods based on behavioral understanding are becoming a more sustainable approach. It is not about elimination, but management. Not reaction, but proactivity. And sometimes success does not come from acting the fastest, but from acting at the right moment. If you find this content useful, leave a comment and don't forget to follow for more scientifically grounded and effective wildlife control strategies. For many years, black bears have been seen as symbols of the wild mountain forests, powerful, cautious, and leaving almost no trace behind. But as the boundary between nature and human settlements continues to shrink, everything begins to change. Encounters no longer happen deep in the forest. Instead, they occur right behind homes, near livestock enclosures, and even beside household garbage bins. And once a bear discovers an easy food source, it will return, not randomly, but following a route that is astonishingly precise. It always begins with very small signs. An overturned trash can, a few claw marks on a tree trunk, or large footprints pressed deep into damp soil. To the untrained eye, these are just scattered details. But to wildlife control specialists, they form a complete map. Every trace reveals how the bear moves when it appears, and most importantly, that it has begun to see this area as safe enough to return repeatedly. Unlike many other animals, bears do not act hastily. They may return to the same location over several consecutive nights, simply to observe. If no danger is detected, they move closer. If food remains available, they remember. And once a habit is formed, driving them away becomes almost ineffective. This is exactly when control measures must be implemented, not as a reaction, but as a step ahead. The strategy does not begin with immediately setting traps. Instead, the entire area is carefully surveyed. Main movement routes are identified based on tracks, claw marks, and approach directions. Infrared cameras are installed at multiple points to accurately record the bear's timing and behavior. Some bears appear so consistently that their movements can almost be predicted step by step. And it is this data that determines where traps are placed. Not where it is convenient, but where the bear is certain to pass. Once the location is determined, the conditioning phase begins. A portion of food is placed at the trap site, but the mechanism is not yet activated. The goal is not to capture immediately, but to make the bear feel completely safe. Over several consecutive days, it returns, feeds, and leaves without encountering any danger. This repetition creates a habit, an almost automatic response. And only then does the trap truly become effective. Contrary to common assumptions, bear trap systems are designed for control, not harm. Sturdy metal structures are firmly anchored to the ground, strong enough to contain an adult bear while still minimizing excessive panic. A one-way mechanism allows the bear to enter easily, but prevents it from exiting. And when the door closes, everything happens quickly and efficiently, reducing the risk of the animal injuring itself. After the trap is triggered, the next steps are carried out by specialists. The bear is sedated under strictly controlled conditions, then examined for health and transported to a suitable location, typically deep forest areas far from human settlements. The goal is not removal, but restoration of balance, returning the animal to where it belongs while minimizing the risk of future conflict. In many cases, it is human behavior, often unintentional, that lies at the root of the problem. Leftover food, unsecured trash, or feeding wildlife all contribute to altering the bear's habits. When natural food sources are replaced by easier alternatives, their behavior changes accordingly. And when that happens, control is no longer optional. It becomes necessary. Managing bears is not a single action, but an entire system. And when done correctly, the result is not just the prevention of damage. It is the preservation of a natural balance, where nature continues to operate by its own rules, and humans learn to adapt rather than disrupt it.
Along the edges of forests where they meet residential areas, the presence of bears is no longer occasional. They return, observe, remember, and once they discover an easy food source, trash, livestock, storage areas, they begin forming a dangerous habit. Once that habit repeats, simple deterrence methods are no longer effective. At a forest edge area in Northern America, the signs have become increasingly clear. Trash is scattered as if a small storm passed through. Tree trunks carry deep claw marks far above human reach. And on damp ground, large footprints form a fixed trail. This is no longer a wandering individual. This is a bear that knows the route. The control team does not begin with traps. They begin with observation. Infrared cameras are placed along movement corridors, not to capture every moment, but to identify patterns. After several nights, a clear pattern emerges. The bear appears at the same time, follows the same path, and pauses at a specific point before moving deeper into residential areas. Once the behavior is identified, the trap is set. Unlike smaller traps, this system is designed as a complete control structure. A cylindrical steel tube trap, over 2 meters long, with a diameter wide enough for a full-grown bear to enter without feeling confined. Inside, there are no sharp edges. Everything is rounded to minimize injury risk. But the decisive point lies in the trigger mechanism. Instead of using injuring clamp traps, this system uses a one-way drop door. Once the bear moves deep enough inside, its body weight activates the closing mechanism behind it. The steel door slides down quickly but without a harsh impact, just enough to block escape. Once inside, the bear has no way out. However, capturing the bear is only half the story. After the trap is triggered, the control team does not approach immediately. They monitor remotely through cameras to ensure the animal remains stable and not overly stressed. The timing of approach is carefully calculated, usually when the bear has calmed down. But not everything is always controlled in time. In some forest edge areas, there have been cases where bears move deep into residential zones without early detection, entering yards, livestock areas, or familiar human pathways. In close encounters, tension rises rapidly and people often have little time to react, especially when the bear has grown used to searching for food near human activity. making it more bold and likely to return repeatedly, gradually erasing the boundary between wild and residential space. The next stage requires precision. The bear may be sedated using specialized equipment, then health checked, tagged, and relocated to a suitable area, usually deeper into the forest, far from residential zones. The goal is not removal, but balance. But things do not always go as planned. If the trap closes too early and only part of the bear enters, it will learn and never return. If the scent is not natural enough, it will stop at the edge and disappear. And if the timing is missed when the bear is fully inside, the opportunity may be lost forever. That is why bear control is not a single action, but a tightly connected strategy. From observation, trap setup, scent guidance, to the exact moment of activation. As the boundary between forest and residential areas continues to shrink, systems like this are becoming the last line of defense. No noise, no chaos, just precise calculation, step by step. Because once a bear learns to return, the question is no longer whether it will appear again. The question is, next time, are you ready?
十分あるね。